people who had very bad experiences. They either had an overdose, they had what would be called a bad trip. They didn't have good guidance. Not everyone's psychological constitution is prepared to deal with the shock of a mind-altering drug of that kind of power. Yeah. And
right.
Now you have someone like Steve Jobs, who basically said, thank goodness for LSD. You know, it opened my mind. You know, much of what I was able to accomplish was a result of the fact I'd gone through that experience.
Yeah,
a lot
that was
of people,
a shocker to hear.
Yeah, well, but a lot of people that had LSD absolutely felt that. And
right, exactly.
I'm an artist. I'm a writer. I'm a film producer. I'm a director. I came out of this, what became a dark period at the Bureau of Research. I came out of it to go on to be accepted at the American Film Institute, the Center for Advanced Film Studies. I have had a very lengthy career in film and television. I've been successful. People know the films I've done. They know, going back to the Transformers cartoons, where I was production coordinator for Marvel, 79 episodes. They all have my name.
Right.
So it didn't damage me in any long-term sense, although I did go through a period before I resigned at the Institute. See, both John Selby and I resigned at different times and for different reasons, but it got to be too much, and we were really being manipulated in ways that were damaging, and we document that in the book. That you describe the love story aspect of the book, and that's John Selby's story, but how his participation in this program really interfered with his love relationship and all his other relationships. So I think it makes the book, maybe you'll agree with me, really interesting that you have 2 points of view. You have two people's stories.
That's what I liked, and how you told it. I mean, it's two stories in one.
Yeah,
it's like
they intersect completely.
Right,
the
right.
Stories
it's
intersect.
like, you're reading a love story, but hidden in between the lines is really, the messages of what's really going on behind the scenes. Now, when you have also, you were talking about being a filmmaker, you also created, we were talking about Timothy Leary, who was infamous for his slogan, turn on, tune in, and drop out. And that really was indicative of a whole generation who were really tapped into experiencing acid and what the mind expansion and the consciousness would absorb or gain from that. But you did a movie that was supported by Timothy Leary. It's called Timothy Leary's Dead. It's a biographical film. Tell us a little bit about that experience. That had to be a trip in itself.
It was. Now, my experiences at the Institute were in 1967 and 1968. So flash forward from that into the 1990s. I had already produced Roswell. That came to the attention of Timothy Leary's publisher at that time, Ronin Press. And Sebastian Orfali was president then of that company, and he said, he got in touch with me after we met at a book convention, and he said, Timothy is dying. He has prostate cancer that has metastasized, and his time is limited. And no one has made a film biography of his life. Oh. And he said, I'd like to recommend to Timothy that you be a director of a film about him. Let's see if he would agree. Well, Timothy agreed, all the more so after he heard that I had worked with Dr. Osmond with LSD
at
Princeton. So Timothy knew Dr. Osmond very well, and so he accepted me to make the project, but where were the resources going to come from to do it? I didn't know, but I knew an entrepreneur who was rather well off, who had a talk show, who had interviewed me about Roswell, and he said he wanted to make a movie. And so I met with him, and I told him there was this chance to do it about Timothy, and he took out his checkbook right then and there and said, "When can we start?" So we had about, I guess, maybe 6 or 7 lengthy interview sessions with Timothy. We also interviewed Baba Ram Das, who was Richard Alpert, who was his number 2 man when he researched psilocybin at Princeton.
Right.
And Ralph Metzger. The 3 of them wrote a manual on psychedelics based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead, a psychedelic experience, I think it was called.
Right.
So all of this footage we had of Timothy, I mean, went into everything in his life, from childhood to prison when he was arrested, to his escape from Princeton and being on the lam and seeking asylum in Switzerland, then leaving Switzerland, being rearrested in Afghanistan by the CIA and tossed in high security prison and put in a cell next to Charles Manson. And this was because Timothy Leary, well, the pretext was that he was arrested for possession of marijuana, something that maybe a majority of people in 29 states, can do legally, except for the federal law, but on their state laws. So today it's blasé, so somebody smoked a joint. It's Merlot, yes. Well, you're talking about marijuana light. There's also marijuana heavy. But the thing is, in those days, they used the law to persecute people. And they got Timothy on the charge of possession of 2 joints of marijuana. That was worth 5 years in prison, okay? Wow. When he escaped, he had more hard times slapped on him. He went from low security to high security prison. And Ken Kesey is another one. They did the same. Ken Kesey wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And and what was the other one?
And they arrested him too?
Sometimes a Great Notion was another of his books. Yes, he was arrested too for possession of marijuana, and he fled to Mexico. But he was the one who was proselytizing LSD when it was legal. It was legal until 1966. He's the one that had the school bus that they painted in psychedelic colors. They called the bus Further. He went around the United States dispensing LSD to thousands of people in different cities, city parks, or wherever he would park his bus. And Tom Wolfe wrote a book about that called The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. Very, very famous book, now a classic.
Right,
So the point is, in those days, they really persecuted people for marijuana. And, I've looked at the history of the marijuana laws, and I buy the story that those laws were originally passed really for 2 main reasons. One was to protect the cotton industry and nylon industries against the use of hemp as a competing product.
Right.
They had the lobbyists in Congress and outlawed it. You couldn't even grow hemp. You couldn't use hemp for rope because it had microscopic traces of a psychedelic compound in it. And now, of course, politicians on both sides of the political aisle are trying to get all those laws changed. To growing hemp should be legal.
It's still classified in number 1, section 1, right
crazy.
up there with
insane. Absolutely worse than insane. It's worse than the Tea Party in Alice in Wonderland. It's that nuts. But
totally
you have
agree.
John Boehner, who was Speaker of the House, saying, let's change that law now. And he's now on the board of directors, I think it is, of one of the marijuana corporations.
But we have Sessions at the helm.
You put him aside for a moment. We'll talk about him in a minute. Let's talk about McConnell, Senator McConnell. I think he's Kentucky, right? And maybe tobacco growing isn't as lucrative there as it used to be, and he wants to grow, promote growing hemp there. So lot of politicians, Republicans and Democrats, are coming aboard on the legalization process here, because the fact is, the scare stories that were put out about marijuana as a gateway drug leading people to become heroin addicts have been shown to be just that, scare stories with no substance.
It's unbelievable what we've been fed. It really is what has, the fear that's been pumped down our throats. I mean, it's just
pack of lies upon lies upon lies. And they stopped the research on LSD and the other psychedelics for 50 years. They just stopped it cold turkey. When Nancy Reagan said just say no, that meant no to the scientists too. It's like George Bush. George W. Bush said no to stem cell research, right? He put very strong strictures on how stem cell research could be conducted, which limited advances massively, while other countries tore ahead. So I just
amazing.
Have to use the word utter stupidity that this is still classed federally, because it generates a tremendous disrespect for all laws, that you would have a law that is so completely inappropriate and out of step with the times.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right. It really needs to be reevaluated. And, there's a part here in regard to the benefits that it really does support, and hence the 29 medicinal states that support it. So we're looking at what I find even more astounding in today's very diverse nation that we live in is that there is actual communication and not a lot of fear about the talk of microdosing for both depression and PTSD. So for me, I find that as a little bit of a, wow, okay, we've stepped forward a little bit in taking this incredible drug that Albert Hofmann, the Swiss scientist, created, and then, utilizing it in a way where it was actually intended. So, a little baby steps, Paul, baby steps.
Yeah, I mean, it's taken 50 years to move one pawn on the chessboard of this whole subject. And that's sort of par for the course for human society in most fields. I
know.
But the thing about going back to the book, Blowing America's Mind, it's at Amazon, by the way, and you can get it either as paperback or as a Kindle, or you can get it in other ebook formats too, Barnes & Noble online or wherever. It's easy to find. Blowing America's Mind. But,
Blowing America's Mind.
It tells our story of what it was like to be part of that program while we were Princeton students. Thus, there's the college love story is a part of it. It's true. We've told the story as it happened to us. We've used real names of the doctors. We've included what we later learned about MKUltra and the CIA's involvement in the program. And we waited, a good 40 years to release it for the reasons I discussed. One, we wanted to wait till the coast was clear. We think the coast is clear now. We don't think that this does any harm to our careers at this point. But it might have. It might have back in the days when I was working on the Transformers and I wrote 6 of the Star Wars books for George Lucas with my wife. Putting out a book then about my involvement with the LSD program might not have been helpful with that part of my career.
Right. But it's being talked about. Like we were saying, Netflix is, doing these shows. When this came out and this was exposed, how did our government investigate it? What did they do? Were they thorough?
Good question. Good question. So you need a little background. Richard Helms was the head of the CIA back when this was happening. And, he put in motion a program that had dimensions to it that would remind one of the Nazi era. The 149 projects at 86 American institutions being secretly funded with no one knowing of the CIA's connection to any of it at prisons, at hospitals, at colleges, universities, at private research facilities. Even on unsuspecting civilians in subways were experimented on with spraying of LSD and things like that.